welcome. You are watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, as I was last week, and across the table as he was last week, friend and colleague Mr. Mohammed Mboj. Mr. Mboj, welcome to the program.
Let's be careful, it could be AI.
Yes, indeed. One can never be too sure these days.
Never be too sure these days.
Welcome as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
And viewers, if you are new to the program, or even if you're a regular viewer, just let's say what the program is all about. It's called The Week in Review for a very good reason. We review 10 stories. I used to say big stories, but just ones that we think deserve a bit more of a look at. And then, in the next hour or so, we go through those stories here on the program. So you're wondering, what's on the menu then? Well, first up, Attorney General has commented on, Dada Ejalo has commented on the fact that Senator Bojang, the man who was arrested, charged, acquitted, and then rearrested, has finally been freed. And he had some comments to say about that rearrest particularly. Also, the Gambia has appointed a special prosecutor for the Jammeh-era crimes, Mr. Hackett, Martin Hackett, a very interesting one if you can go online and find out about him. Also, NAWEC, National Water and Electricity Company, they've announced power deficit, and this is at a time when, lots of people are experiencing outages, power outages, and so they thought they'd come and be upfront and tell us to expect even more, and it's kind of scary as well. And also, His Excellency the President has presented operational vehicles to the Drug Law Enforcement Agency to help with their work. We've also had here in the Gambia just concluded First Ladies Forum, which is zero tolerance for gender-based violence. It just ended on Friday. And also ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, marks 50 years of its existence, and they're using the whole year, not just a specific day. They're using the whole year to mark different aspects. And over the week just gone, they highlighted the role of women in peacekeeping in ECOWAS. Also the Gambia Teacher Prize, that's just been awarded, 2026. Also the Independent Electoral Commission, they've just started the supplementary voter registration exercise, and you'll find out why it's supplementary. And also World Peace Gambia, we've covered them before. Really like what they're doing. Beekeeping as a method of earning an income. Yes. And finally, the impact of the Middle East conflict on Africa, including on the Gambia, of course. So these are all the stories that you will be hearing us delve into. So, of course, the first one I mentioned is the first one we will get into. Attorney General Dada Ejalo at a press conference where he was talking about how successful the government were in their cases, and they gave these impressive percentages, which Mr. Mboj will get into. He also commented on the fact that this Hussein Bojang and his sister Ami had been tried for the murder, 2 PIU officers. He was then tried, he was acquitted, and then immediately rearrested. But then very, very quickly, I think after people took to the streets, one has to say, he was released. Have a look, have a listen.
It's not lawful, it's regrettable, it happened. So after having been formally released from the prisons, he could not have been rearrested without a further court order, which I am not aware of. The courts are not controlled by us. That's actually what we desired for as a democracy. The courts are supposed to be independent. They are supposed to assess evidence and reach a conclusion. But the process is an ongoing thing.
Responding to calls for his resignation, the minister defended his record and that of his ministry and rejected any suggestions of stepping down.
I am hired to even deal with those challenges, to find out why our case is being lost. How do we resolve them? How do we solve those problems to make sure we lost as few cases as possible?
Mr. Mboj, that was, one of the points, wasn't it? Because we talk about Hussein Bojang and Ami Bojang, and he said not lawful and regrettable. But I did ask our colleague who did that story, Osman Jatta, I said, for me there was an obvious follow-up question, because the Attorney General went on to say they should not have been rearrested without a court order, and yet they were. And yet he said nobody asked, so who then gave the order for the rearrest. And so we're none the wiser. I really wish I'd been there, because I certainly would have asked that question.
Absolutely, but even the language, unlawful, granted, it is not regrettable. Regrettable is really very, it sounds almost exculpatory in many ways. It makes it sound sort of minor, regrettable, it happened. No, when you break the law, you want remedy and accountability.
Indeed.
When you tell us that it was unlawful, so who broke the law?
And is that person going to be made to pay for breaking the law?
That's
As I said, these are the questions
and
that I was surprised were not asked.
Any consequences from that when you break a law with all of us? This is what happens when we break the law, and by telling us that it was unlawful, somebody must give account.
Yeah, right.
Who gave the order to make the arrest? We really do not know.
Yeah, so we'll push on that one. And I did say to Usman Jatta that this is the typical glass half full or half empty. He said 78% of their prosecutions were successful, the state ones. But then, as you and I know, when one looks beneath the surface, the question is asked, why are most of the high-profile ones not successful? The ones that the public... So the 78% came as a surprise to people like, oh, because what people remember are the high-profile ones that the government, that the state lost.
Absolutely, Ade. Because, yes, when he said, okay, can we disaggregate, as it were, the 75, 78%, whatever, and see really what is going on? And that question, actually, that point, is different from the Bojang case, what actually happened. I understand. Here, what do we have Justice Gaita saying? The investigation fell far short of the standards required for serious criminal charges.
Quite.
So that's really where the issue is. Yes. There are just so many questions to ask. Sure. Let us take, for instance, the undersized shoes.
Quite.
This really exonerated him, apparently, reportedly exonerated, rather than implicate.
Indeed.
Didn't they discuss this when they were going? So there are hints of incompetence in this particular case.
Sure.
And others might probably point to other cases because this one comes hot on the heels of the Abdullah Sanyang one.
Well,
he was also acquitted. Yeah. So there are questions that the Attorney General, Minister of Justice, must really answer.
This is it. Now, when people are sitting in judgment of a case, as Justice Jaite did, they're not allowed to be scathing. But short of, if one sort of interrogates his comments, they were scathing, including what you've just mentioned. And he went by chapter and verse as to why they had signally failed to prove their case. It wasn't for Bojang to claim or prove that he was innocent. He didn't charge himself. They charged him. The onus was on them, and they failed to bring it. That's why I was aghast when they said they were going to appeal it. I thought, on what grounds? You had your chance to present the evidence, to present a case, and you signally failed to do so. And the judge told you that in no uncertain terms. As I said, if he were a political or a media commentator, he would have been allowed to be scathing. But as a judge, he's not. All he did was point out the failings of their case, and he pointed out quite nakedly how poorly they had presented their case. And as you rightly say, you have the Attorney General's chambers, you have the Director of Public Prosecutions, Inspector General of Police. All of these people have to come together to preside over the evidence in front of them and say, this is a case worth pursuing. As I mentioned to our colleagues, and probably on the This Morning program, when I was involved in these, you had to have a 60% chance that you thought you were going to get a prosecution based on the evidence you had before you could take. I don't know what the threshold is here, but those were the things that seemingly were not done.
Absolutely. His point that acquittals, really, that we have occasionally in our courts, these are sort of evidence of independence of the judiciary.
Yeah, quite.
I say granted, but again, for instance, with the Bojang case, we are seeing something else, possible incompetence with the prosecutions. This is what Jaita said. Yes. It's not our view, really. It's not our judgment. It is really his judgment. And in simple things, video recording requirements. how come, as mandated by law, didn't follow that?
Right.
Did we have sort of media by trial by media here? What do we have here? They were calling Bojang a rebel.
Yeah.
And even the defense used it as sort of this kind of, explosion, this sort of language will prejudice
quite.
the fairness of the trial. The CCTV footage.
Yeah.
This is what officials were saying, government officials. Why were they making all these comments? And then in court, no legs to stand on. Quite. Nothing really stood up. So there are many questions. The Attorney General's press conference, in many ways, generated more questions than answers. So we have to go through all of these things.
Sure.
What is going on? It was no surprise the GBA said that accountability stops with him, the Gambia Bar Association. And then absolutely so.
Sure.
And this thing about suspects being acquitted and freed and then immediately afterwards being arrested, straight out of the Yahya Jammeh rule book.
Absolutely.
So this is the key. And it's high time, really, we hold people accountable.
Indeed.
That is really what the key is. Not telling us that the whole episode, breaking the law, was regrettable.
No, it was unforgivable, more like. Thank you for that. But yes, I mean, I think this one, as you rightly said, more questions than answers, really.
Absolutely.
And I will wish, people had really sort of raised those questions at the time of the press conference. Well, thank you for that. And on to our next story, which is also a sort of legal matter, but not necessarily just for the Gambian courts. A special prosecutor has been appointed to prosecute crimes under the Jammeh era, committed under the Jammeh era. Have a look and have a listen.
I'm honored to announce, on behalf of the government of the Gambia, that Mr. Martin Hackett, a British national, has been appointed as the special prosecutor for the Gambia to head the investigations and prosecutions of the TRRC cases. Investigate cases of serious human rights violations, including international and domestic crimes that have occurred between July 1994 and January 2017, using any method or technique permitted by applicable law. 2, to initiate and conduct prosecutions for offenses which were recommended by the TRRC and accepted by the government for prosecution, and which come to the attention of the special prosecutor during his investigations of the TRRC file.
Mr. Mboj, after a lot of talk, a lot of criticism that we were not moving or we were moving too slowly, we now have Martin Hackett. As you did, I did as well, went online and examined why have we chosen this man, and it's quite an impressive record he has thus far.
That's it. I understand that we have 13 candidates. Only one Gambian applied. I think this will be relevant later, possibly in our discussions.
Sure.
So they decided that Hackett was the best person for the job.
Indeed.
Over 30 years experience in criminal, I understand, international law.
That's right.
He's a senior CPS prosecutor in Britain. We start from there, Crown Prosecution Service. Absolutely, and Category 4, very high level.
Yeah.
And he participated in the United Nations Special Tribunal for Lebanon, in The Hague, and in Kosovo as well.
Yes, indeed.
So when it comes to that, it appears that he's got the credentials, the right credentials.
Indeed.
So, but why Martin Hackett?
Quite.
As well, it
as
goes on.
You rightly say.
It goes on. Or why a foreigner as well? Because this is in the context of this. So the argument is that, well, as a foreigner, perhaps we want to reduce opportunities for political interference
and undue influence and so on.
Undue influence and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So that's really how the government, in many ways, are sort of sold this. He's vastly experienced in the area, and the fact that he's a foreigner, there'll be no political influence, and it will perhaps send the right signals to the international partners. Maybe they're likely to trust a Brit than anybody else, and perhaps even to the domestic audience, to us. So perhaps if we had appointed a Gambian or whatever, how we would see it, because, you know, being part of us, we can see all kinds of connections.
Well, this is it.
But maybe with a foreigner, it wouldn't be so easy, as it were.
Yes.
So this is the case.
I saw echoes of the Sierra Leone Special Court in this appointment, in the sense that they also did that. They went for foreigners. And I remember I went there, and the chief of comms there, an American chap, Peter Anderson, was a friend of mine. And so he was able to get me in to speak to and interview some of the lawyers. And actually, I asked one of them, and I said, why are you getting involved in this? You know, you were practicing in Britain. He said, are you kidding? He said, this is the first ever hybrid case where they use international and domestic law. He said, it's history making. He said, that's why I want to get involved. So, you know, he had his own kind of selfish career reasons. I said, oh, really? I said, that's not what Sierra Leoneans want to hear. They want to hear that, you know, it's because you think that these people should be prosecuted. And they said, oh, of course. He said, that goes without saying. I said, well, you need to say it. But there's also that fact that, you know, all the people, the lead prosecutor, the chief judge, and so on, they were all non-Sierra Leoneans, and for similar reasons, actually were advanced. Because we have very, very able sort of legal minds who could have done it, but they wanted to take away that suspicion of political influence and interference, which was more likely to be as kind of leveraged against a Sierra Leonean than it would against, and I suspect we've taken the same similar consideration here in the Gambia.
And absolutely, and I have to say, yes, people's motives. That sort of thing could be very interesting. I do not know. But how is your competence? It will be interesting, for instance, to consider back Nuremberg, Robert Jackson. What were his motives? Sir David Maxwell V. What were his motives? But the effectiveness, as it were. So motives could be very funny. You know what I mean? You can derive them from wherever, yet your effectiveness is a legal,
that's you will be judged
legal eagle. You know what I mean? That's it. In the end, that's what's going to be judged. So this is it. Let's move on. I suspect that whoever, you know, that you give that sort of position to, you're going to have criticism from certain quarters. It's the nature of these appointments, isn't it?
It's inevitable.
So now, what next? How fast? What's the procedure?
Because this is only one step.
That's just one step. And I understand that the whole office will be a kind of like training institution, training us in how to handle complex, as it were, cases like that, and forensics and all the rest of it. So, yes, they've taken the next step, then what next?
Yes, it should be very interesting.
Absolutely.
I think we'll all keep an eye on this.
And I'm sure the Gambian element, why
not
chosen the Gambian element? That will roll on, I suspect, for a while.
And I think, you know, you've said that because that argument started straight away. Because we'd been told weeks ago, because I even have a sticker which on this post-it notes, which has been on outside on the glass in front of my desk for the last 12 weeks. And it said a British person to be appointed, because we'd heard the rumor. But everybody I asked was saying, oh, I'm not aware. Even people at the Justice Ministry were saying, and that sticker's been there for 12 weeks. I only took it down when the announcement was made, because now it has confirmed what that thing, because I've been pursuing it on a fairly regular basis, almost every couple of weeks. I would ask, can you tell us if this has happened and so on? But obviously now they've been able to reveal the name and we know it. But straight away they think, oh, why not a Gambian? And the competence of the Hackett and his team will say whether this question keeps getting raised anymore.
Absolutely. When these things happen, sort of like the nationalist reflexes, they kick in. Because there was a secret thing in me, you know, thinking, it would have been interesting had it been a Gambian. We want to do it ourselves. But again, that desire to have a Gambian sort of like, it's not my primary consideration. That has to be secondary. First, the competence, the experience to be able to execute these things. So earlier on I said, only one Gambian applied. I think that is so significant.
Indeed.
It tells us that maybe when it comes to this level, well, I could think of perhaps an SR file, because he had done this at the ICC, senior counsel at that senior level. but maybe because he had done that one.
And he's done the TRRC.
And the TRRC one afterwards.
And of course, because this will be looking at
TRRC. So maybe we couldn't have him do that. Possibly. And Fatuma Bensouda as well, senior person who could do these things. Sure. But now she is our High Commissioner in Britain. So really, we cannot do that. I do not know. Yeah. So yes, but we have to be honest to ourselves. Any other area we are talking about, we are short of expertise. This is it. Any other area, we say this all the time, we are short of expertise. So let us be consistent. We shouldn't be surprised in this area if we are. There are many lawyers, but at this level, I'm not so sure.
Yes, is it?
I'm not so sure.
Definitely with you on that. Thank you. Story number 3, National Water and Electricity Company. Now, if you live in the Gambia and you live in certain parts of the Gambia, you might be used to power outages. And I say this with a slight trepidation. Over the last couple of weeks, when people have been complaining about power outages, where I live, close to Coastal Road, we've had none. So I don't want to jinx it, but for the rest of the Greater Banjul and the rest of the country that has been suffering, they were very glad that NAWEC came out and explained as much as they could what was happening and what is likely to happen. And it wasn't particularly good news. Don't believe me? Have a look and have a listen.
The load shedding that was published the last time and implemented was due to some technical problems in terms of the power that is coming into the country. So because of that, we had to, our consumption demand was higher than what we are getting, including even our local generation. So we had to load shed. And that was why that was out there and is still out there. And I can tell the public this is going to be a long-term load shedding that will be out there for public to understand. Anytime we have a problem, this is the load shedding schedule that we will be using to manage any emergency situation. Where you have our boreholes, we try to prioritize them because if water is affected, we have double problem, right? So the lucky ones that are within those feeder lines will be on. So it's not a favoritism. Also areas like the hospitals, we need to prioritize.
We need to prioritize areas. You know, I always scratch my head and at the same time hold my head, if people will pardon mixing those metaphors. Whenever I hear the term load shedding, it's become common usage in South Africa, in certain parts of South Africa, because of power. And now in the Gambia, they want us to get used to it, because as he said, this will be long term. So get ready for the pain. It's not a fleeting thing. So Boj, I'm not sure if you're as unlucky as some, or as lucky as I am, touch wood, that we've not been affected by this thus far.
Yep, absolutely. He said it there, why you're lucky. Maybe you are around a borehole or these feeder lines. He uses that phrase, as it were. Sure. So yes, it's being in the right place.
Indeed,
the right time. Yeah. But I'm just not sure what to make of this. The current load shedding, he says, because of technical problems in terms of power coming into the country. Yeah. And then just shortly afterwards, the problems including even local generation.
Which is why I was scratching my head. Now, when they said local power generation, is it because of imported fuel for local power generation? Though we know we've been trying to get towards more solar, but that's not happened on the scale that would make a difference. Yeah.
And generation, well, it seems to me it's much more than the fuel. Do I have the infrastructure in place, as it were, then the fuel would come in. We've had situations in the past where there were no problems with the supply chain that we're experiencing now, but still we didn't get really the supply that we should. So we all know that it takes much more than this, even though we want to attribute everything to this. But what have we here? According to their information, 52% of the available capacity is imported. We only generate really 22%. Something like that. So this is quite curious, because not long ago we were talking about the 90% electrification.
This is it.
Then I'm like, so you're going to connect me to the grid, but whether I'm going to have regular, as it were, a power supply.
Which is what I want to hear.
Which is what I want to hear.
Sure.
But to be fair to ourselves, I'm not going to make undue demands. You know, it doesn't matter what they say. We know that there are certain levels. We don't have the capacity. That's really what the reality is. Things may improve. The whole Gambia, we may be able to go for a whole month without even a single, as it were, power cut. But you know that at some point it's going to stop. We do not have the capacity, for instance, supply 1 year without a single power cut. You can get that in other countries, you know, that sort of thing.
Name some of
we
them,
don't need to name them, but we know what the issues are. We know. We are in some trouble. You know, even though they want to sort of, not long ago, the electrification, they had sort of used it to paint this rosy, sort of glittering picture of what's about to happen. Now we've been put back in our position, or we'll be load shedding for a long time.
Well, this is it, because in brief, they said the deficit was driven by limited generation capacity, fuel supply challenges, and broader global energy disruptions.
So you've given me many. So that is just one of them. Taking care of that one. I'm not sure how he's going to take care of the others. Not quite so. So let us be honest with one another. We know that, you know, there's a certain level of supply. We can't give it, whether we want it or not. Never mind what government says. You can't.
So he did tell us, he's warned us to be brace ourselves. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Boj. Story number 4. His Excellency the President recently held a press conference for a ceremonial handing over of 8 vehicles, operational vehicles, to the Drug Law Enforcement Agency. Have a look, have a listen.
As efforts to tackle the flow of illicit drugs are strengthened, mobility is a key component of these efforts. These vehicles are expected to ease logistical challenges faced by the agency and enhance patrol operations, response times, and overall enforcement capacity.
It further demonstrates our commitment to enhancing the operational capacity of the league to effectively fight drug abuse and trafficking in the country. I must make it quite clear that for us, security sector reform is not merely about providing equipment and vehicles. It is largely about transforming our institutions. We will therefore continue to maintain zero tolerance on banned substances and related crimes. The achievements registered over the past years by our security agencies, including DLEAD, are worth commendation. Accordingly, I urge the DLEAD management to sustain the momentum. By doing so, be assured of my government's unwavering support.
Unwavering support from the government. 8 vehicles. We know that the threat, if one listens and sees and reads the international media and the data that's published, our region is very much still one that's the kind of enforcement and the tracking is quite weak. And so the Drug Law Enforcement Agency, of course, 8 vehicles will help, but we're still a lot more to do in terms of tackling illicit drug flows, and I'll use the term porous borders only once here, but that doesn't help either, Mr. Boj.
Oh yes, and sort of over the years, you do hear about busts and sort of even large ones. Maybe the problem we have is that, okay, this one, they've made this bust, but I wonder how many of them do get away when you don't know. You don't know about it, so you do not know. So it's really difficult to measure, even though the president there wants to say that, you know, what they've achieved so far is commendable, as it were, that sort of thing. So with us, that is really what the issue is, and he said it. SSR. It's not merely about vehicles and equipment. That's really the heart of the matter. It's about the institutional reforms,
Indeed,
as
indeed.
it were. We change the way we do things,
Sure.
as it were. We conduct business. I have to be honest, I really haven't seen anything in that direction to show me that we have actually changed the way we do business.
And
the reason why we wanted to come with all these institutional reforms,
Sure.
we knew that the whole thing was destroyed
Indeed.
on the Jamia. Let us be honest with it. That was why earlier on, with the immediate arrest of Bojang, we said, ooh,
yeah.
that's it. That's a very
It's-
Jamia era kind of thing.
Quite.
So how much of the way we do business, it's still that model?
Sure.
That is really what the heart of the matter is.
And I don't want to depress anybody, but when I read a report on Guinea-Bissau, and one of the criticisms, this was about 3 years ago, and it said that they had given the drug law enforcement people more vehicles, but then they found out that, in fact, some of these vehicles were being used in the drug trade and facilitating the illicit drug trade. And so, as you rightly say, it's not just about vehicles. It cannot be just about vehicles. It has to be more than that. Vehicles help, of course, but it has to be so much more than that.
He knows that.
Yeah.
That was why he said it.
Yeah.
But we all know what are the problems with our institutions, with the bureaucracy.
Sure.
Give us any position, I will use whatever facilities are there for my own personal gain.
Yeah, sure.
This is really what the problem is.
Yeah.
So it isn't a governmental issue, it's a cultural one.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you for that. That takes us to story number 5, which will also take us to the midpoint, certainly in terms of stories, if not in terms of time. First Ladies Conference on Zero Tolerance on GBV, gender-based violence, has just concluded on Friday here in the Gambia. Here's some of what went down.
Dividend since the hotline was launched. People started coming out to report problems about gender-based violence, and I believe with this special code for gender-based violence will make sure that the cases are not delayed and victims will get justice immediately. And this is a very good initiative that the Gambia government has already sown.
Funded by the World Bank under the Sweat Plus initiative, the forum is part of a broader regional effort to empower women and girls across 7 countries, namely the Gambia, Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, Chad, and Togo.
But I want to say it again to my fellow survivors. Our scars are not our identity. They are the testimony that you are still here, standing, breathing, refusing to be erased, which alone is victory.
It's a fight and it is a struggle. I was surprised I didn't see Sierra Leone's First Lady there, seeing as the president there had gotten gender-based violence as a, what was the term he used, national emergency. So I had expected to see her there, but nonetheless, this is a fight that continues. In this case, in instance, we had the First Ladies. We had Senegal's First Lady was here, certainly. And I guess every effort helps, but it still remains a sizable one. The First Lady also spoke about the court that we've now instituted here in the Gambia to tackle specifically those, so take it out of the normal court system, if one can use that phrase, but there's still a lot that needs to be done.
Absolutely. We'll see how things go. What can they do? We know that the statistics I saw earlier in this country, only 10% of survivors really seek help. And fewer than 1% of reported cases usually result in convictions. What do you think?
And that's embarrassingly low.
Yes. It is formidable what we need to face.
Sure.
When it comes to gender-based violence and other things. It's just socially the way we are.
Yeah.
Certain things, they're not for these institutions, they're for families too. So, but it's good that we have these, these platforms, these outlets where people can go and get help.
Yeah, sure.
in case you choose to.
Yes, indeed.
You see, for people with the help, with the resources to go and use them, it's important it is there.
Sure.
The bigger thing we tackle here is the normative stuff. How do you really tackle that? Because in the end, that will be the thing that makes the difference.
Absolutely. That will be the thing. Thank you for that, Mr. Bojang. That takes us to the midway point in terms of stories, and we will go for a commercial break. Join us after this commercial break. Hello and welcome back. You are watching QTV and you are watching the Week in Review, or should I say you're still watching the Week in Review if you were with us in the first half. And if you weren't, I don't know, you might have been watching some really good football match. So, you know, I don't want to ask why, but you've missed 5 good stories, but fear not, 5 good ones still to come. When I was introducing the program, I mentioned ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, is commemorating this year 50 years of its existence. And one of the commemorations here in the Gambia focused on the role of women in peacekeeping. Have a look and have a listen.
50 years ago, West African leaders, including the late former president of the Gambia, Sador Kairaba Jawara, met in Lagos to lay the foundations of a united regional community. Today, that vision has matured into a strong sub-regional bloc that had and continues to play a critical role in promoting peace and security, with ECOWAS forces still stationed in the Gambia and Guinea-Bissau. Mayor Lily French, ECOWAS country representative, praised the role of West African women in peacekeeping, noting that their contribution goes beyond security to ensuring long-term stability.
West African women have made significant and even transformative contributions to peacekeeping, both on the ground and in UN missions, through grassroots peace movements. West Africa has become a major contributor for female peacekeepers. African women now make up half of all the UN women peacekeeping missions globally. Women peacekeepers have brought unique advantages in community engagement. They can access and communicate with local women in conservative or conflict-affected societies where men cannot. They play key roles in preventing gender-based violence, supporting survivors of abuse, and building trust with local communities.
Mr. Bojang, quite a lot of the things that people might not be aware of, including I was not that 50% of the sort of global total of peacekeepers are African women. That one certainly took me by surprise. But before you come in on this and other matters, when the story was broadcast and a colleague of mine or friend of mine in Sierra Leone saw it, rather than deal with what the topic was, he started whinging about what is ECOWAS celebrating. I said, that's not what the story is. They're commemorating 50 years of their existence, and they're just telling us some of the things. But, you know, he just wanted, oh, they've got nothing to celebrate, But to get back on track and on subject, women, the celebration here in the Gambia highlighted the role of women in peacekeeping particularly.
Absolutely. And with these things, how many times have we discussed this? Is it a celebration or a commemoration?
Yeah, quite.
We are merely commemorating the existence of this body.
Yeah, it's a landmark.
It's a landmark,
50 years. A body's existence.
Isn't that what, diamond? Or is it golden? 50 is golden. Golden jubilee.
Right,
so this is all that we are doing. The fact that I can point out so many different areas where you see a deficit
quite.
doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't a good idea to form it. Now imagine West Africa without ECOWAS.
Yeah, well, this is it. This is it. And
you see, you can't even imagine it.
Was it last week or week before we did a story about ECOWAS, and I said the reason I brought it was about the ECOWAS investments here in the Gambia, because people concentrate unduly, I think, on the kind of negatives and the failures. And it's almost as if they're not even aware of the successes, and of course, including something like the role of women in peacekeeping.
And we do not understand under what circumstances they are operating.
Yeah, quite.
Yes, we are all individually. We refuse to let go, to give out a bit of our sovereignty for the regional body to work. Each country is holding on to your sovereignty, as it were, really. In many ways, that's how it is. Therefore, the regional body and even the AU, how can it work? The improvements or whatever, they're going to be so slow, and everybody must agree. You are never going to have a radical agenda that would shift the dial with this sort of organization. It's never going to happen. So you cannot blame them for what they cannot deliver.
Indeed, indeed.
At all. So we will mark it, even though we know the shortcomings.
Indeed.
And with their 50% of peacekeeping around the world, perhaps the cynic would say, yes, cannon fodder.
Well, yeah,
now
it's kind of scary, isn't it?
They are tired of it. Now they're giving us all of these things.
That's right, yeah.
But you know, we'll be working at it, working on it, and see where it goes. But
Indeed.
the total cynicism, I think, is to miss the point.
It does miss the point, and it is, 50 years is not all that long.
At all. In the life of an individual in our day, 50 years means really nothing.
Quite.
Much less so in the life of a nation.
Yeah, quite.
But really, you talk about centuries.
Yeah,
really,
indeed. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you. So that was number 6. Story number 7, Gambia Teacher Prize 2026, just concluded this very week. And the winner is, I won't spoil it for you, let them tell you.
The winner for the 2026 NAMI Foundation Best Teacher Prize is Celia Kevin.
Standing here today as a recipient of the National Teacher Award, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This honor is not mine alone. It belongs to my students whose curiosity and determination inspire me daily, to my colleagues whose dedication and support in making teaching a shared journey.
Teachers remain the cornerstone of our education system and the primary drivers of human capital development.
Ismaila Cisse, the president of the Gambia Teachers Union, emphasized the importance of motivating and inspiring teachers.
You are not just recipients of awards, you are ambassadors of a teaching profession that this nation is beginning to see and celebrate as it deserves.
Pay tribute to individuals who consistently go above and beyond the call of duty. Teachers who invest not only their time and expertise, but often their personal resources to ensure that every child has a chance to succeed.
Mr. Mboj, you and I have said this many times, the importance of the role of teachers in society, in our lives. We were lucky, blessed, whatever one likes to call it, with teachers who, at a certain point when I left Sierra Leone and went back, I suddenly realized that my much younger cousins and nieces and nephews were being taught by teachers who did not see it as a vocation. It was just a job, and they collected their money if they got paid at all at the end of the month. And it really came home to me. And when I told them about the teachers I'd gone through for whom it was a vocation, they actually thought I was making stuff up. So this is only the 3rd, and I think, to be welcomed. I think.
Yes, the prestige and status that teaching had represented on our continent, actually, not just in the Gambia. The great Nyerere, Mwalima, the teacher, as it were. So here, anyone in this country who became anything bigger, as it were, professionally, he started as a teacher.
Yes, many.
So it had status in the community. People had respect for you. There was not much in terms of money.
No, quite.
They're a bit like nurses, aren't they? You are not going to have money. So professions like teaching, nursing, and others like that, they attract a certain character.
Sure.
Isn't it? Really? If I really want money and material, that is not the profession for you. It's a bit like journalism as well. You're not going to have much money,
no, you're not going to
but
get
it's
rich.
the passion, you love it, as it were, that is really going to take you to it. You cannot see yourself doing anything else. It's stuff like that. So yes, it's a good thing to be recognized and that sort of thing. But we all know that the issues, what the issues are. So we are not going to spoil this by really bringing all the downers. We all know what the downers are. So let's just keep it out this time.
And thumbs up to the winner, Sidi Akebe.
Sidi Akebe. Right, congratulations, of course.
Thank you. Story number 8, a very different one, the Independent Electoral Commission. And I made the point, they've started a nationwide supplementary voter registration exercise. What's one of those, you say? This will tell you. Have a listen.
And close 5 o'clock sharp. The turnout cannot be general registration. This is supplementary. Those who lost or mutilated their cats, those are the ones that we are supplying. It cannot be 10s. 12 days. Today is second day. Then 10 days more for this month. Another month later, another 12 days.
The exercise also aims to correct errors and remove duplicate entries, ensuring an accurate voters register and minimizing the risk of electoral disputes.
Certain areas, very few people came. As I said, it's a team movement. So if you don't register, come out and register where you're supposed to register. If we move, you have to chase the team. And that might be very detrimental.
If we move, you have to chase the team. Mr. Boj, I said, and I wanted to emphasize the point, supplementary. So this is not your regular voter exercise. If you've lost or it's been mutilated, who knows, you might have washed it by accident or whatever. That's what this is for. We're in election year. Our colleague Osman Jatta also mentioned about wanting to get the register right and up to scratch and up to date. So that's what this is about. And so you would expect to see, of course, fewer people in the queue than the regular voter registration.
Absolutely. And those who turned 18 after the last election, I'm sure by that they'll be smarting. Still wouldn't be able to vote. I cannot get a voter's card.
Quite.
Why?
Quite,
why is that?
Yeah.
That's a different point.
Sure.
Well, fine. What is one to make of this? If you've lost your card or sort of got yours damaged or whatever, you can go and do it.
Yeah.
Since you're not going to have anybody coming to have a voter registration card, a voter's card, originally, really for the first time, then we'll see. Because normally they'll tell you that people who are not eligible to have these cards are getting them. But here it seems as if that sort of case, that sort of situation should not arise, because we are told that only those with it, but maybe you've lost it, they can establish that you lost it.
You've made the point I was going to make, and I had a rather cheeky reason for including. I have a rather cheeky reason for including this story, because before I came, when we did the story, and I said, it's interesting because until we did the story, I also had not realized that it was the supplementary voter exercise registration that was taking place. All the political parties seemed to be saying, use this opportunity, register to vote. That's not what it is at all. And you can quote me on this because you can go on their pages, on their Facebook and their website pages.
Wait, the IEC official made the point. So let us be careful. This is supplementary. Those who've had it, but for one reason or another, got damaged or they had lost it, and even then, see, this is the case. For a new registration, it seems it's not about that.
It's not about that. Not about that.
Should we ask why not?
Why not? Is it because they don't think they have the capacity to do it between now and an election because all the checks and that need? Who knows? But it's one that's worth asking. But also the political parties need to maybe change what they've got on their various Facebook pages,
and
because it's not about that.
What should be the priority? It would be interesting to know the numbers since the last election. How many of our citizens have turned 18?
Yeah, that would be an interesting one.
That would be an interesting one,
It's food for thought.
So what should be the imperative? We are a democratic society, isn't it? So the state should make it as easy for citizens to be able to vote. That's really what the issue is.
Indeed.
So we should be very careful here. So it will be interesting.
It'll be very interesting. But you've given me food for thought there about how many turned 18. I will be digging for that statistic.
Yeah, thank you. To know.
Yeah, sure. We need to know. Thank you. Story number 9, our penultimate story, is about youth in the Gambia getting unusual job opportunities and earning an unlikely livelihood. Doing what, you ask? Beekeeping, that's what. Have a look, have a listen.
5 months ago, 5 young people began a journey into beekeeping. trained by the World Peace Organization, a non-profit focused on sustainable initiatives that uplift communities. Today, that training is bearing fruit. Under the morning sun, bees move from flower to flower, gathering nectar. Back at the hive, the nectar is passed from bee to bee, gradually transformed and stored as honey in carefully built combs. Now, the trainees are harvesting that effort, lifting frames from the hive and extracting thick, golden honey. The process is delicate, filtered, settled, and bottled into a pure, natural product. Yankubabo thanked God for this journey. When we started, we prayed for success, and today we are proud. We encourage young people sitting idle to join us. Beekeeping has many benefits. The initiative is part of a broader effort to create opportunities for young people across the Gambia, using practical skills to improve livelihoods. Abubakar Ba.
We are also expecting more harvest in coming days because most of our boxes are already conceived and they are yet to be harvested by next week or so. So we are appealing to the general public, Gambian youth in general, so they can come up, they can join us and adventure in this honey production. Only benefits are there.
Mr. Mboj, I have to say, we have to give kudos to our colleague Abdou Cisse, who's a camera operator here. He came upon these youths 5 months ago, and he was intrigued. And he thought, doing what? Beekeeping? You're training in beekeeping? So when he told us, we said, let's do the story, and then let's go back at the end of the training to see how many of them stuck with it. Because there's been a kind of tradition of people not sticking with these types of things. And in fact, all of them had, and were now earning, in some cases, quite a decent living from it. So that's what drove us back to revisit them and the area. And of course, you can get honey from, if you go into a shop where they sell honey, you can get from all sorts of things, not just from bees. There's honey that comes from, you know, nectar from trees and flowers and so on. But this was beekeeping specifically. And all of them stuck with it for the 5 months, and now they're going into it as a business.
Absolutely, apiculture. That's all right. Yes, so this is the key. 5 people, yes, they will benefit from this. But then afterwards, would they stay in? Do we have a kind of the structures where one can go into it and be really successful? Because you need a whole infrastructure, as it were,
to take you beyond that initial enthusiasm.
That initial enthusiasm,
yeah,
isn't it? So that's really the key.
Sure.
But you know, the fact that we can offer.
Yeah, sure.
There's this possibility existing. It's a good thing. Anybody thinking about it? Possibly there's something to do.
Might be something to get into. Thank you for that. Now, our final story. Producer is telling me 3 minutes, but my watch says we started at 35 minutes, so I make it 6 minutes still, but we can argue about that later. The impact of the conflict in the Middle East. A civilization did not come to an end, but there's been a pause in the fighting. In spite of that, things have been impacted across the globe, including fuel and so on. And of course, Africa, the Gambia, we've all suffered. Here's a look and here's a listen.
The Middle East accounts for 15.8% of Africa's imports and 10.9% of its exports, making the stability of the region a vital economic concern for the continent. While the crisis presents broad risks, several African nations are experiencing short-term gains through trade diversion and rerouted logistics. Nigeria is positioned to benefit from elevated oil prices and the export expansion of the Dangote refinery. Shipping rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope has also boosted maritime activity for South Africa's Durban port, Walvis Bay in Namibia and Mauritius, increasing demand for bunkering and port services. According to the African Development Bank, 29 African countries have seen their currencies depreciate, raising the cost of servicing external debt and weakening foreign exchange reserves. This has triggered a severe fiscal squeeze in countries with high dependency on imported food and fuel.
Of course, we are one of those with a high dependency on imported food and fuel, including our staple food, rice. Mr. Mboj said, you know, a civilization did not come to an end at midnight, Central Eastern Time or whatever. But nonetheless, the disruption is real. People might look at 15.8%, 10.9%, those figures as not being, but it's quite important what it is that's coming through in terms of that, you know, fuel, fertilizer, and so on. And of course, we're feeling the impact. But as we said there, some countries are benefiting because rather than go there, they're going to these African countries. And you think, why didn't they go to them in the first place?
That's it. But more generally, isn't it? With most of us, we import all sorts of things. So one analyst said that Africa is paying a conflict tax on a war that's got really nothing to do with us. Yeah. The 3 F's. Yeah, sure. Fuel, food, freight. Yeah. So this is really what the problem is. And once again, from COVID-19, once again we are seeing really how vulnerable we are. Yeah, sure. We keep on saying it, to external shocks, vulnerable to external shocks. But this is exactly it. Sure. If you do not run your country well, sooner or later you'll be found out.
Yeah, indeed.
These so-called external shocks, they expose that really the emperor's got no clothes.
Oh, this is it.
So we have our politicians who we're improving this, we're doing that, but every time these things happen, they really expose that, yes, you might be, whatever you're doing, God, you are a long way from being independent.
Well, this is it. Because I used the analogy when I was discussing it with Osman Jatta. I said it's like your alarm clock goes off. How many times does it need to go off before you wake up? We had COVID-19, Russia-Ukraine war affected fertilizer, and now this. And we still haven't woken up, seemingly. So
that's it. Yeah. And some of us, we know that to really take care of this problem is a long-term issue.
Indeed.
But the worrying thing is, what you need to get right first, we are getting from the Mo Ibrahim Foundation their statistics. When it comes to governance, everything is going down.
Indeed.
We face this economic problem, you are not going to solve it without good governance.
Indeed.
What do we see around? Yeah. This is really what the worry is for me.
A big worry and a depressing thought to end on, Mr. Mboj. But we have come to the end, and it just needs for me to say thank you for your interjections throughout. And, of course, to the viewers, thank you for watching. And to those who keep stopping me in the street and calling me Mr. Mboj, I'm Mr. Darami. Here's Mr. Mboj. Yes. Thank you for watching until we come your way again, next week. Goodbye.